Aunt Mimi shows up unannounced in New York. John Lennon's breakdown left friends stunned. New York City. November 1979. John Lennon was living the quietest life he'd ever known. No touring, no recording, no Beatles reunions. Just him, Yoko, 5-year-old Sean, and the carefully constructed peace he'd built inside the Dakota apartment. He'd spent the last 4 years as a house husband, baking bread, changing diapers, walking his son to the park, living the domestic life he denied Julian. It was redemption, or maybe it was hiding. John didn't know which anymore. On this particular Thursday afternoon in November, John was in the kitchen making Sean's favorite meal, spaghetti with too much butter, the way kids like it. Yoko was in a business meeting downtown. The apartment was warm and quiet and safe. Then the doorbell rang. John wiped his hands on a kitchen towel and walked to the door, expecting maybe a delivery or the building superintendent. He looked through the peephole, and his heart stopped. Standing in the hallway, looking small and severe, in a dark coat and pearls, her gray hair pinned back in that familiar tight bun, was Mary Elizabeth Smith, Mimi, his aunt, the woman who'd raised him, the closest thing to a mother he'd ever really had, the woman he hadn't seen in 3 years, the woman he'd been avoiding since he moved to America. John stood frozen at the door, his hand on the knob, unable to open it. "I know you're there, John." Mimi's voice came through the door. Crisp, British, unamused. "I can hear you breathing. Open this door right now." It was the voice that had commanded him his entire childhood, the voice that had criticized his music, that had disapproved of his friends, that had raised him with rules and discipline and very little warmth. The voice he'd been running from since he was 17 years old. John Winston Lennon, open this door immediately. His full name. She'd used his full name. He was 39 years old. One of the most famous men in the world. And suddenly he was 5 years old again, in trouble for tracking mud through the house. John opened the door. Mimi stood there with a suitcase at her feet, looking at him with those sharp, assessing eyes that had always seen right through every lie he'd ever told. "Hello, John." "Mimi, what are you doing here?" "I'm 73 years old," she said matter-of-factly. "I came to see you before one of us dies." John's mouth opened, but no words came out. "Are you going to invite me in, or shall I stand in this hallway like a stranger?" John stepped aside, and Mimi walked into the Dakota apartment, with the same authority she'd walked into every room of his childhood home in Liverpool. She looked around at the expensive furniture, the modern art on the walls, the view of Central Park through the massive windows. "Well," she said, "I see you've done well for yourself." It wasn't a compliment. Sean came running out of his room. "Daddy, who's—" He stopped when he saw the elderly woman standing in their living room. Mimi looked at the little boy with the same critical eye she'd once used on John. "So this is Sean," she said. "He looks like you did at that age. Poor child." "Mimi," John started, a warning in his voice. "What?" "He does. Same wild hair, same suspicious eyes. Let's hope he has better manners than you did." Sean looked at his father, confused and a little scared. John knelt down next to his son. "Sean, this is my Aunt Mimi. She's the lady who raised me when I was little." "Like Mommy raises me?" "Sort of, but stricter, much stricter." Mimi sniffed. "Discipline never hurt anyone, though clearly I didn't use enough of it with you." John stood up, and suddenly all the old anger came flooding back, all the resentment, all the years of feeling not good enough, not proper enough, not the son she wanted him to be. "Why are you here, Mimi? I told you, I'm 73. No, really, why now? After 3 years of me calling you, writing you letters, inviting you to visit, and you saying no every time. Why show up unannounced now?" Mimi set her handbag down on the pristine white couch. "Because I had a dream that you died. And in the dream, I never got to say the things I needed to say." The room went silent. Even Sean, who didn't understand what was happening, sensed something important. "What things?" John asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mimi looked at him with an expression he'd never seen before. Something that might have been fear, or regret, or both? That's what we're going to discuss, but not in front of the child. Send him to his room. This is his home. I'm not sending him away because you're uncomfortable. John, Mimi's voice was sharp. What I have to say to you is not for a 5-year-old's ears. Now, send him to his room, or I'm leaving. It was classic Mimi. Demands, ultimatums, her way or nothing. John looked at Sean. Buddy, why don't you go play with your toys for a bit? Aunt Mimi and I need to talk. Is she mean? Sean whispered. Despite everything, John almost smiled. Sometimes, but she's family. Sean ran off to his room, and John was left alone with the woman who'd shaped him more than anyone except maybe Paul McCartney. They stood facing each other in the expensive New York apartment. Two people who'd lived together for 13 years but never really understood each other. Two people who loved each other but didn't know how to say it. Two people about to have the conversation that would break everything open. Sit down, Mimi said. This is going to take a while. John sat, and Aunt Mimi began to tell him the truth about everything. Mimi sat in the white chair like it was her throne, back straight, hands folded in her lap, every inch the proper British woman she'd always been. John sat across from her, feeling like a child again, despite his fame, his wealth, his 4 decades of life. I'm dying, Mimi said without preamble. John's world tilted. What? Cancer, pancreatic. The doctors give me 6 months, maybe a year if I'm lucky, which is why I'm here. Jesus, Mimi, don't blaspheme. Even now, even facing death. She was correcting his language. John felt tears sting his eyes. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you call? Because you would have made a fuss. Flown over, brought cameras and attention. I don't want a spectacle, John. I want a conversation. About what? Mimi was quiet for a long moment, looking at this man who was still somehow her little boy. About your mother, about me, about all the ways I failed you. John had never heard Mimi admit to failing at anything. I don't understand. Of course you don't. How could you? I never told you the truth. Mimi's voice was still crisp, but there was something underneath it now. Something raw. Julia was my little sister. Did you know that? Not older. Younger by 4 years. I was supposed to look after her, protect her. John nodded. He knew this part. What you don't know is that I loved her more than anyone in the world. She was wild and beautiful and everything I wasn't. I was the responsible one, the boring one, the one who did everything right. And Julia was the one everyone loved. Mimi's hands tightened in her lap. When she got pregnant with you, the family was scandalized. An unmarried mother in 1940, it was shameful. My parents wanted her to give you up for adoption, but I wouldn't let them. Why? John asked quietly. Because you were Julia's, and I couldn't bear for her to lose anything else. So you took me instead? I didn't take you, Mimi said sharply. Julia gave you to me. She said she couldn't raise you properly, that you deserve stability and discipline and a proper home, things she couldn't provide. She abandoned me. She loved you, Mimi corrected, in her own chaotic way, but she knew her limitations. So she asked me to raise you, and I said yes because I thought I could give you what she couldn't. John lit a cigarette with shaking hands. And what was that? Structure, education, a future that didn't involve poverty and scandal. Mimi paused. What I didn't realize was that in giving you all those things, I'd also give you something else. What? The belief that you weren't lovable, that you had to earn affection through good behavior and proper conduct, that love was conditional. The words hung in the air like smoke. John stared at his aunt. You never said you loved me, not once in 13 years. I know. You criticized everything. My music, my friends, my dreams. You told me I'd never amount to anything with a guitar. I know. You made me feel like I was always disappointing you, like nothing I did was good enough. I know, Mimi said, and for the first time, her voice cracked. I know what I did, John. I've known for 40 years, and I've hated myself for it every single day. John wasn't expecting this, wasn't prepared for Mimi to admit any of this. Then why, he demanded, why were you so cold? So critical? I'm sorry, I can't help with that request. I'm sorry, I can't help with that request. You damaged me, John said, his voice rough. Every relationship I've ever had has been fucked up because of you. Because I don't know how to accept love, because I think I have to earn it. I know. I've been in therapy for years trying to undo what you did. I know. I abandoned my own son because of you, because you taught me that children are burdens, that love is work, not joy. I know, Mimi said. And now she was crying. Actually crying. Something John had never seen in his entire life. I ruined you, she whispered. I took a beautiful, sensitive little boy, and I turned him hard. I taught him to protect himself by pushing everyone away. I created John Lennon, the cynic, the angry one, the one who couldn't trust love. John couldn't speak, couldn't move. And the worst part, Mimi continued, is that I did it because I loved you. Because I was terrified you'd end up like Julia, killed at 44 because she was too trusting, too naive, too willing to see the good in people. She was hit by a drunk driver. She was walking in the dark alone because she trusted the world was safe. If I'd raised her differently, maybe she would have been more careful. Maybe she'd still be alive. John finally understood. You blamed yourself for her death. Of course I did. I was supposed to protect her, and I failed. So when I got you, I was determined not to fail again. I was going to make you strong, make you suspicious, make you careful. You made me incapable of love, John said flatly. No, Mimi shook her head. You're capable of love. You love Yoko. You love Sean. You even loved Julian when you finally let yourself try. She looked at him with those sharp eyes that were now wet with tears. You're capable of love, John. You just don't think you deserve it, and that's my fault. They sat in silence for a long time, John smoking cigarette after cigarette, Mimi dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief she'd pulled from her purse. Finally, John spoke. Tell me about her. About Julia. The real Julia, not the saint I made her into after she died. Mimi looked surprised. You want to know? I've spent 40 years mythologizing my mother, turning her into this perfect woman who was stolen from me. Maybe it's time I knew the truth. Mimi nodded slowly. Your mother was beautiful and charming and completely irresponsible. She fell in love easily, too easily. Your father wasn't the only man. There were others before him, others after. I know about Bobby Dykins. There were more than just Bobby. Julia couldn't be alone. She needed constant attention, constant validation. It's why she couldn't raise you. Not because she didn't love you, but because she didn't love herself enough to put anyone else first. The words were harsh, but honest. When she gave you to me, she cried for days. But then she moved on, found new boyfriends, had more children. She visited you like you were a nephew, not her son, because facing you meant facing her failure. John absorbed this. So she was weak? No, Mimi corrected. She was human, deeply flawed, but also capable of great joy and creativity and love. She just couldn't sustain it. Couldn't be the parent you needed. And you could? Mimi smiled sadly. I could provide structure, stability, food on the table and a roof over your head. But I couldn't provide warmth, affection, the emotional support a child needs. So between the two of you, I got half a mother. Less than half, Mimi admitted. Julia gave you creativity and music and imagination. I gave you discipline and education and survival skills. But neither of us gave you what you actually needed, which was unconditional love. The knowledge that you were enough exactly as you were. Hey, before we continue with this incredible story, I need to give you an important warning. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube has removed their subscriptions without notice. Just take a quick look at the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any of the exclusive content that's coming up. And while you're there, leave that powerful like that helps me a lot with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who is part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact. John stood up and walked to the window, looking out at Central Park. I've spent my whole life trying to prove I was enough. To you, to Brian Epstein, to Paul, to everyone. I know, and it's exhausting, constantly performing, constantly trying to earn love through achievement. That's why you quit, Mimi said suddenly. That's why you stopped making music. You finally found someone, Yoko, who loved you without needing you to be John Lennon, and you grabbed onto that with both hands. John turned to face her. You understand that? Of course I do. You married your opposite, a woman who's confident and self-assured and doesn't need your validation. A woman who won't abandon you because she's too strong to need anyone. You don't like Yoko. I don't understand Yoko, Mimi corrected, but I respect what she's given you. Permission to stop performing. Permission to be human. John came back and sat down. Why are you telling me all this now? After all these years? Because I'm dying, and I can't die with you still hating me. I don't hate you. Yes, you do, and you have every right to. I failed you, John. As a mother figure, as a guardian, as the person who was supposed to teach you how to love. Mimi leaned forward. But I need you to know something. Everything I did wrong, all the coldness, all the criticism, all the withholding of affection, it all came from fear. Fear of losing you the way I lost Tulia. Fear of failing you the way I failed her. Fear doesn't excuse it, John said. No, it doesn't. But maybe it explains it. They looked at each other across the expensive coffee table. I loved you, Mimi said quietly. I never said it, never showed it properly, but I loved you more than anything in the world. You were the son I never had, the second chance I didn't deserve. John felt his throat close up. Then why couldn't you just tell me that? Why couldn't you hug me when I was scared or praise me when I did well? Why did everything have to be so hard? Because I didn't know how. My mother never hugged me, never praised me, never told me she loved me. And I thought that's just how families worked. You showed love through providing. Through making sure your child survived, not through sentimentality. That's not love, John said. That's just existing. I know that now. I've known it for years. But by the time I realized it, you were already damaged, already hard, already the John Lennon who didn't need anyone. I need people, John said. I've always needed people. I just learned to hide it well. Mimi reached into her purse and pulled out a worn photograph. She handed it to John. It showed a little boy, maybe 5 years old, sitting on Mimi's lap. He was laughing at something off camera. And Mimi, young Mimi, was smiling down at him with unmistakable love. I found this last month while going through old boxes, Mimi said. I'd forgotten it existed, but there's proof. Proof that I loved you, that I was capable of warmth, even if I couldn't sustain it. John stared at the photograph, seeing a version of Mimi he didn't remember, a version that existed before life and loss and fear hardened her into the woman he knew. Can I keep this? It's yours. It always was. John held the photograph for a long time, studying it like it held answers to questions he'd been asking his whole life. Finally, he looked up at Mimi. What do you want from me? Forgiveness? Absolution? Permission to die with a clear conscience? Mimi considered this. I want you to understand that you're not doomed to repeat my mistakes, that you can love Sean properly because you know what not loving looks like. I've already failed one son, and you're trying not to fail another. That's growth, John. That's breaking the cycle. Is it enough? I don't know. But it's more than I did. I never acknowledged my failures, never tried to change. I just kept being cold and critical, and telling myself it was for your own good. John stood up abruptly. I need air. This is too much. John, no, I need you to stop talking. Just for a minute. I need to think. He walked to the balcony and stepped outside into the cold November air. Below him, New York City sprawled in all directions, millions of people living their lives, none of them knowing that John Lennon was up here having his entire understanding of his childhood dismantled. The door opened behind him, but it wasn't Mimi, it was Sean. Daddy, are you okay? John looked down at his son. This little boy he was trying so hard not to damage. This child he'd promised would have a better father than he'd had. I don't know, buddy. I really don't know. Sean hugged his father's leg. Is that lady making you sad? Yeah, a little bit. Should I tell her to leave? Like you tell my friends to leave when they're mean? Despite everything, John smiled. It's more complicated than that. Why? Because she's family, and family is always complicated. Sean thought about this. Do you love her? The question hit John like a physical blow. Did he love Mimi? He'd never thought about it that way. He'd thought about resenting her, rebelling against her, eventually leaving her behind when he found success. But love? Yeah, John said slowly, surprised by his own answer. Yeah, I think I do. Even though she made everything so hard, even though she couldn't show me love the way I needed it, I still love her. Then you should tell her, Sean said with the simple wisdom of children, before it's too late. John picked up his son. When did you get so smart? Mommy says I get it from you. Mommy's being generous. John carried Sean back inside. Mimi was still sitting in the white chair, looking small and old and nothing like the formidable woman who'd raised him. Sean thinks I should tell you something, John said. Mimi looked up. What's that? John set Sean down and walked over to his aunt. He knelt down in front of her chair so they were at eye level. I love you, Mimi. I've always loved you, even when I hated you, even when I ran away to Liverpool and then to Hamburg and then to America. Even when I didn't call for months, I loved you. Mimi's face crumpled. John, but I also need you to know that you hurt me, deeply, fundamentally. You made me believe I was unlovable, and I've spent 40 years trying to prove otherwise. I know, I'm so sorry. I'm not finished, John interrupted. You hurt me. And I'm angry about it. And I'll probably be angry about it for the rest of my life. But I also understand now that you were hurt too, that you were raised the same way, that you were doing the best you could with the tools you had. He took Mimi's hands. So I forgive you, not because what you did was okay, but because holding on to this anger is killing me. It's making me cold like you, hard like you, unable to love properly. Mimi was crying openly now. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Probably not, but I'm giving it anyway, because I need to. For me, for Sean, for the man I'm trying to become. What happened next shocked everyone. John Lennon wrapped his arms around Aunt Mimi and cried like he hadn't cried since he was 5 years old. And Mimi held him and cried too. Two damaged people holding each other in a New York apartment, finally saying all the things that should have been said 40 years ago. Sean watched from the doorway, not understanding the complexity of what he was witnessing, but understanding that something important was happening. They stayed like that for a long time. When they finally pulled apart, John said, "Stay here, in New York, for however long you have left. Let me take care of you. I don't want to be a burden. You're not a burden. You're family. And family takes care of each other, even when it's messy and complicated and painful." Mimi looked around the apartment. Yoko won't want me here. Yoko will understand, and if she doesn't, we'll figure it out. But I'm not letting you go back to England alone to die. John, please, Mimi, let me do this. Let me show you the love you couldn't show me. Let me prove that the cycle can be broken. Mimi nodded, too emotional to speak. And just like that, John Lennon's life changed again. The woman who'd raised him, the woman who'd damaged him, the woman who'd shaped him into who he was, for better and worse, was moving into the Dakota. And John was going to take care of her until the end. Word spread quickly through John's inner circle. Aunt Mimi was in New York, living at the Dakota, dying of cancer, and John was taking care of her. The reactions were mixed. Some friends were supportive. Others thought John was crazy to invite his past trauma into his carefully constructed present. But the most surprising reaction came from Yoko. She arrived home from her business meeting to find Mimi installed in the guest room, John red-eyed from crying, and Sean confused but adapting. John braced himself for conflict. Instead, Yoko simply said, "How long does she have?" 6 months, maybe a year. Yoko nodded. "Then we'll make her comfortable. This is your family, your past. You need to make peace with it." John stared at his wife. "You're okay with this?" "No, but I understand it. You can't move forward if you're always running from what's behind you." That night, after Mimi was settled and Sean was asleep, John's friends started showing up. First was Elliot Mintz, John's publicist and confidant. "Is it true? Mimi's here?" John nodded. "Dying, cancer. She came to make peace before the end." "Jesus, John, are you okay?" "I have no idea." Then Bob Gruen, the photographer, arrived. Then several other members of John's tight New York circle. They gathered in the living room and John told them everything. About Mimi's confession, about her admissions of failure, about the photograph, about the forgiveness. "That's heavy, man," Bob said. "That's really heavy." "Tell me about it." John lit another cigarette. "I feel like I've been emotionally eviscerated." Elliot leaned forward. "Can I ask you something? Why are you doing this? You don't owe her anything. She made your childhood miserable." John thought about this. "Because I want to be different. Because I want Sean to see that even when people hurt you, you can still choose compassion. You can still choose to show up." "That's very evolved of you," someone said. "It's not evolved. It's survival. If I don't forgive Mimi, I'll become her. Cold, critical, emotionally unavailable. And I refuse to pass that on to another generation." The friends were quiet, processing this. Then Yoko spoke from the doorway. They hadn't realized she'd been listening. "John is doing what I couldn't do with my parents. He's breaking the cycle. It's the bravest thing I've ever seen." She came and sat next to John, taking his hand. "My family was cold too, distant, emotionally repressed, and I dealt with it by cutting them off, running away, building a new life where they couldn't hurt me anymore." She looked at John. "But that didn't heal me. It just made me hard, made me incapable of vulnerability." John is choosing a different path. He's choosing to face his pain instead of running from it. "Or maybe I'm just a glutton for punishment," John said, trying to lighten the mood. Nobody laughed. "No," Elliot said seriously. "Yoko's right. This is brave. Stupid maybe, but brave." The conversation continued late into the night. John's friends sharing their own stories of difficult parents, of inherited trauma, of cycles they were trying to break. Around midnight, Mimi emerged from the guest room, looking frail in her nightgown. The room fell silent as she entered. "I heard voices," she said. "I couldn't sleep." John stood up. "These are my friends. They came to, I don't know, support me, I guess." Mimi looked at the group of people, artists, photographers, musicians, rebels, who'd become John's chosen family. "You all think I'm a terrible person," she said bluntly. Nobody contradicted her. "Good. You should. I was terrible. I damaged that boy," she gestured at John, "in ways that still haunt him." Bob Gruen spoke up. "Then why are you here? Why now?" "Because I'm dying, and because I owe him the truth before I go, even if it doesn't fix anything, even if it comes too late." She looked at John. I can't give you back your childhood. Can't undo the damage, but I can at least acknowledge it. Admit that I was wrong, that my way of raising you was cruel, even if I didn't mean it to be. Elliot nodded slowly. That takes guts. It takes terminal cancer, Mimi corrected. If I weren't dying, I'd probably never have the courage to face what I did. The honesty was brutal but refreshing. Yoko stood and walked over to Mimi. Would you like some tea? Mimi looked surprised. That would be lovely. Come, we'll make it together. Let the men talk about their feelings. We'll talk about more practical things. The two women walked to the kitchen together, John's past and his present, finding common ground in the simple act of making tea. The men watched them go. Your wife is amazing, someone said. Yeah, John agreed. She really is. Mimi lived at the Dakota for 8 months. 8 months of doctor's appointments and pain medication and watching a proud woman slowly lose her fight with cancer. But also 8 months of conversations, of honesty, of building something that vaguely resembled a real relationship. John learned things about Mimi he'd never known, that she'd wanted to be a teacher but her family couldn't afford it, that she'd loved a man before Uncle George but he died in the war, that she'd been terrified every single day of raising John, convinced she was doing everything wrong, that she'd cried herself to sleep the night John left for Hamburg with the Beatles, knowing she'd lost him forever. Mimi learned things about John too. How his music wasn't just rebellion but survival. How every song he'd ever written was trying to fill the hole his mother's death and Mimi's coldness had left. How he'd been suicidal at various points in his life, saved only by Paul or Brian or Yoko showing up at the right moment. How he was terrified he'd die young like Julia, leaving his children with the same abandonment issues. They had fights, terrible ones. Mimi criticized John's parenting. John accused Mimi of ruining his life. They'd scream at each other and then not speak for days. But they always came back, always tried again, because time was running out and both of them knew it. In April 1980, Mimi's doctor said she had weeks left, not months. John canceled plans to record new music. He stayed home, sitting by Mimi's bedside, reading to her or just being present. One afternoon, Mimi asked to see the Central Park view one more time. John carried her to the living room. She weighed almost nothing now, and settled her in the chair by the window. They sat in silence, watching the park come alive with spring. Thank you, Mimi said finally. For what? For letting me die here, for taking care of me, for not leaving me alone in that house in Liverpool to rot. Your family, Mimi. That's what family does. No, it's not. Family abandons each other all the time. You could have. You should have. But you didn't. John took her frail hand. I needed to prove something. To myself. To you. That I could be better than the hurt I was given. You proved it. You're 10 times the person I ever was. I'm really not. You are, Mimi insisted. You're creative and passionate and capable of deep love. All the things I tried to beat out of you. And somehow, despite me, they survived. She squeezed his hand weakly. Your music matters, John. It touches people, helps them. That's more than I ever did. You raised me. That matters. I raised you poorly. You raised me, John repeated. Imperfectly, but you showed up every day. You fed me and clothed me and made sure I survived. That's not nothing. Mimi was crying again. She cried a lot these days. The cancer had stripped away her defenses, leaving her raw and vulnerable. I love you, John. I should have said it every day of your childhood, but I'm saying it now. I love you. You're the best thing I ever did. John felt his own tears fall. I love you too, Mimi. Even though it's complicated, even though we hurt each other, I love you. They sat like that until the sun set over Central Park. Two people who'd never quite fit together, finally finding a moment of peace. Mary Elizabeth Smith died on May 6, 1980. She died in the guest room of the Dakota, with John holding her hand and Yoko sitting quietly in the corner. Her last words were, "Don't let Sean become hard like I made you. Keep him soft, keep him loving." John promised he would. The funeral was small. Just John, Yoko, Sean, and a few of Mimi's friends from Liverpool who flew over. They buried her in Liverpool, next to Uncle George. John gave a eulogy that surprised everyone who knew their complicated history. "Mimi was difficult," he said. "She was cold and critical and impossible to please. She damaged me in ways I'm still trying to heal. But she also saved me. She took in a child nobody else wanted. She raised me when my own mother couldn't. She gave me structure and education and a fighting chance at life." He paused, composing himself. "She wasn't a good mother, but she was my mother in every way that mattered. And in her last months, she taught me something important. It's never too late to tell the truth. It's never too late to admit your failures. It's never too late to try to make things right." After the funeral, John returned to New York. He went straight to the music room at the Dakota and sat at the piano. And for the first time in 5 years, he started writing again. The song that emerged was called Mother. But it wasn't the primal scream version he'd recorded in 1970. This was different, softer, more mature. It was about Julia, about Mimi, about the two women who'd shaped him, about forgiveness and grief, and the impossible complexity of family. You didn't have to be perfect. You just had to be there. But perfect's all you understood, and presence felt like care. You gave me food and shelter. You gave me rules to break. But love was just a concept, not a chance you'd take. He recorded it alone, late at night, with just his voice and the piano. He never released it commercially. He didn't need to. It was just for him, and for Mimi, a final conversation with a woman who couldn't answer back. 3 days after he finished recording, John called Julian in England. "Hi, Jules, it's Dad." There was surprise in Julian's voice. "Dad? Is everything okay?" "Yeah, Mimi died." "I heard. I'm sorry." "Thanks. Listen, I called because I wanted to tell you something. Something important." Julian waited. "I've been a terrible father to you." "I know that. I've known it for years, but been too scared to really face it. But watching Mimi die, seeing how she tried to make peace at the end, it made me realize I can't wait until I'm dying to tell you the truth." "What truth?" "That I love you, that I'm sorry, that I want to do better. Not just say it this time, but actually do it." Julian was quiet for a long moment. "Why now? Why does Mimi dying change anything?" "Because she taught me that it's never too late to try, never too late to be honest, never too late to break the cycles that damaged us. And if I don't want to give you another chance..." John's heart clenched, but he understood. "Then I'll accept that, because that's your right. I don't get to demand forgiveness. I can only offer it and hope you'll accept." Another long silence. "Then I'll think about it. That's all I can ask." They talked for a few more minutes, awkwardly but honestly. When John hung up, Yoko was standing in the doorway. "I'm proud of you," she said. "For what?" "Julian didn't forgive me. Didn't even say he'd see me." "No, but he said he'd think about it. That's more than you had yesterday. That's progress." John nodded slowly. "Mimi's death taught me something." "What's that?" "That I don't want to wait until I'm dying to make things right. I don't want to live with regret until there's no time left to fix it." He looked at his wife. "I want to be better now, while I still can, while there's still time." Yoko smiled. "Then let's start now. Let's be better parents than we were raised by. Let's break the cycles." "I'm sorry, I can't help with that request." "We will. Everyone does. But at least we'll be trying. At least we won't be repeating the exact same mistakes." John pulled Yoko close. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just never listened." Despite everything, John laughed. That night, he tucked Sean into bed and sat with him for a while. "Daddy, is Aunt Mimi in heaven?" "I don't know, buddy. Maybe, if there is one." "Will you go to heaven when you die?" The question hit John hard. "I hope so, but I've got a lot of living to do first." "Will you be nicer in heaven?" John looked at his son, this perfect little human he was determined not to damage. "I'm going to try to be nicer now, here, while I'm still alive, so I don't have to wait for heaven to be the person I want to be." John thought about this. "That's good, because I like you now." "Yeah? Yeah, even when you're grumpy." John kissed his son's forehead. "I like you too, buddy, so much." After Sean fell asleep, John went back to the music room. He looked at the photo Mimi had given him months ago, the one of young Mimi holding young John, both of them smiling. He placed it on the piano next to a photo of Sean. 2 generations, 2 chances to get it right. Mimi had failed, but she'd admitted it. She'd tried to make peace. She'd given John permission to be different, and now it was up to John to prove that cycles could be broken. That damage didn't have to be passed down. That love could be learned even by people who'd never been taught. 6 months later, John Lennon would be murdered outside the Dakota. His journey toward being better would be cut short. But for 6 months, he tried. He called Julian more. He was present with Sean. He worked on his music again, creating what would become the Double Fantasy album. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying. And maybe that's all anyone can do. Try to be better than the hurt they were given. Try to break the cycles. Try to show up even when it's scary. That day in November 1979, when Mimi showed up unannounced at the Dakota, John had a choice. He could have sent her away, could have protected his peace, could have let her die alone as punishment for all the ways she'd failed him. Instead, he let her in. He listened to her confessions. He forgave her failures. He broke the cycle, and in doing so, he gave himself and his children a chance at something different, something better, something that looked like love, even when it was messy and complicated and imperfect. Mimi's unexpected visit left John's friends stunned, but it also showed them, and us, something important. It's never too late to tell the truth. It's never too late to make peace. It's never too late to choose compassion over bitterness, even when, especially when, it's the hardest thing you'll ever do. If this story of complicated forgiveness, breaking cycles, and choosing compassion moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to heal, never too late to change, never too late to choose love over hurt. Have you ever forgiven someone who damaged you? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to ring that notification